The mop hit the marble floor with a sound sharper than shame. 8 dinner guests froze mid-conversation, wine glasses hovering, forks suspended. My son-in-law, Brad, was smiling, too wide, too practiced, as he handed it to me like a gift. "You missed a spot, Margaret," he said. His tone was light, but his eyes were steel. My daughter, Jennifer, didn't look up from her plate. "Mom, please," she murmured, "you're making a scene." It was a scene all right, just not the one they thought they were directing. I gripped the mop handle. My knuckles ached, the arthritis biting at my fingers, but I smiled back, because sometimes a smile is the last defense before war. I saw their guests watching, pity blooming across their faces. They thought they were witnessing humiliation. They weren't. They were watching a woman memorize the moment she decided to burn her old life to the ground. Brad's laugh filled the room, expensive and hollow. He thrived on dominance, the kind that masquerades as charm. Jennifer had fallen for it, the same way I once fell for promises that never came true. She'd forgotten who taught her to stand tall, to never let anyone treat her like help. Maybe she'd learn again, after tonight. I bent to clean the spill, but my mind wasn't on the stain. I was counting seconds, cataloging expressions, and storing every word. 20 years as Harold's wife taught me that silence is an accountant's best friend. You let the numbers add up quietly before you balance the books. Tonight, the numbers finally balanced. When I straightened, Brad had already turned away, back to his investors, back to his false empire. Jennifer avoided my eyes, embarrassed by the mother she'd reduced to a prop in her husband's performance. I placed the mop against the wall, smoothed my dress, and nodded politely to the guests. They went back to pretending nothing had happened. That night, while the house slept, I packed 2 suitcases and 1 small wooden box. I left no note. No argument. Just the calm precision of a woman who had planned her exit for longer than anyone suspected. Let them think I broke under pressure. Let them find what waited in that box. After all, Brad had made one fatal mistake. He forgot that the woman holding the mop used to run the books. Morning sunlight hit the window like judgment. The house was too quiet, that strained kind of silence that follows a performance everyone pretends didn't happen. I sat at the edge of the bed, my suitcase by the door, the wooden box resting on my lap. It wasn't heavy, though the weight of it could crush a conscience. I ran my thumb along its smooth lid, thinking how strange it was that people only notice value when it's gone. Downstairs, laughter floated from the kitchen. Jennifer's voice, soft, apologetic, tried to stitch normalcy back together. "Mom's just sensitive," she whispered to Brad. Sensitive. I smiled at the word. That's what people call you when they mistake self-respect for weakness. I didn't plan to leave that morning. Not yet. Not until everything was ready. I had spent 18 months building a quiet empire of evidence, every conversation, every transaction, every smirk Brad thought went unnoticed. It started with small things, credit card charges I never made, bank transfers that didn't add up. I'd asked questions. Brad had offered polished answers and a patronizing smile. "You're not used to modern banking, Maggie," he'd said. As if confusion were an old woman's currency. The confusion was his. I'd taken Harold's old advice, trust, but verify, and turned it into something sharper. Voice recordings. Bank copies. Safe deposit keys. The wooden box contained the breadcrumb that would lead to everything else. Jennifer had changed too. The girl who once called me every day now texted when she needed money, her affection measured in transactions. I used to tell myself she was just busy, caught up in her new life. But the truth was colder. She'd inherited Brad's smile, the kind that hid motive behind charm. A car engine started outside Brad's. Through the curtain, I watched him drive off in his sleek black sedan, the symbol of all that arrogance polished into chrome. He was heading to a meeting, no doubt. Maybe another investor to impress, another lie to layer on top of old ones. My phone buzzed with a message from him, *remember to pick up Jennifer's prescription. And please, no drama about last night, *drama. That word almost made me laugh. If only he knew the show hadn't even started yet. The call came just after noon, slicing through the quiet like a warning. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me, a habit born of suspicion, answered anyway. Mrs. Collins? A woman's voice, steady, official. This is Detective Ramirez with the Financial Crimes Unit. We've received some information you might want to hear in person. I felt a pulse of cold run through me. What kind of information? It concerns your son-in-law, Bradley Morrison. Are you able to come down to the precinct this afternoon? I said yes before I even thought it through. The detective's tone left no room for small talk. By the time I parked outside the station, my mind had already built and dismantled a dozen possibilities. Maybe someone had finally seen through Brad's perfect act. Maybe the lies had grown too big to contain. Inside, Detective Ramirez greeted me with a folder under her arm. Mrs. Collins, she said, someone sent us an anonymous package this morning. It contained financial documents and voice recordings implicating your son-in-law in multiple fraud cases. We traced the return address to your neighborhood. My breath caught. She slid the folder toward me. Inside were copies of statements I'd hidden months ago, my copies, the ones I'd thought were locked in the safety deposit box. But there they were, sealed and labeled, evidence, Brad Morrison. I didn't send these, I said. She studied me carefully. Then whoever did knows exactly what you've been doing. A chill moved through me. Someone had found my insurance plan. Someone who knew too much. When I returned home, Jennifer was waiting on the porch. Her eyes were red, her voice brittle. Mom, we need to talk. Brad was inside, pacing, his confidence cracked. He held up a stack of printed emails, the kind he used for threats disguised as logic. Why are police asking questions about my firm? What did you do? I looked at him for a long moment and realized something had shifted. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Fear had entered the equation. I didn't do anything, Brad, I said softly. But it seems someone finally did. That night, the wooden box disappeared from my room. Brad didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing the hallway, the rhythm of a man trying to calculate how quickly his world could fall apart. Around 2 a.m, a door slammed. I opened mine a crack just in time to see him drag a suitcase down the stairs. Jennifer stood at the bottom, barefoot, her robe hanging loosely around her shoulders. Brad, where are you going? Work trip, he said, too fast. I just need to get ahead of this nonsense before it spreads. She reached for him, desperate. Nonsense? There's a detective asking questions about you. They said someone sent them proof, he spun on her. Proof of what? That your mother can't tell a spreadsheet from a grocery list? His voice carried that edge I'd heard too many times, the kind that sounded almost reasonable until you caught the threat beneath it. I stayed hidden, watching from the shadowed staircase. Jennifer's face trembled with the realization she'd been holding off for too long. You said her money was safe, Brad. He zipped the suitcase and looked up. It was, until she started digging. Now she's dragged all of us into her paranoia. That word again. Paranoia. Men like Brad use it when a woman starts seeing clearly. After he left, Jennifer found me in the kitchen. Her mascara had smudged, her voice small. Mom, did you send those papers? I met her eyes. No. But they were mine once. For a moment, I saw her battle between loyalty and disbelief. You're saying Brad? I'm saying your husband isn't who you think he is. The kettle began to whistle, thin and sharp, like it wanted to join the argument. Jennifer sank into a chair, her face pale. He said you're confused. That you've been recording things. I have, I said simply. But confusion isn't what's killing him. Truth is. Her phone buzzed then, Brad's name flashing on the screen. She didn't answer. Neither did I. When the kettle finally went quiet, the only sound left was the wind pressing against the windows. In that silence, I knew two things: Brad was running out of moves, and whatever came next would decide which one of us survived the story he'd written. The storm broke just before dusk. Rain hammered the roof in frantic bursts, as if the sky itself had lost patience. I was sitting by the window when Jennifer's car lights cut through the downpour. She ran inside, soaked and shaking, clutching a crumpled note. "He's gone," she gasped. "Brad's gone, Mom. He left this." The note was short, typed, of course. Asterisk, "Tell your mother to stop. If she doesn't, neither of you will have anything left to protect." Asterisk, no signature, no address, just a line of threat written by a man who thought fear could still control me. I stood, calm in a way that startled even me. "He's not threatening us," I said. "He's confessing." Jennifer's voice cracked. "Mom, you have to let the police handle this. He's dangerous." I picked up the wooden box from the table. "He already handled the police. It's my turn." That box, the one he'd stolen, had found its way back home, delivered by someone who wanted this story finished. Inside was a flash drive, one I hadn't placed there. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen filled with documents, transfers, offshore accounts, aliases. Proof that Brad's empire was built on other people's ruin. And among the files, video. It was security footage from a private office, dated a week before Harold died. Brad and Harold together. Harold's voice, calm, firm, unafraid. "If you ever touch her money, I'll bury you with paper trails." Then Brad's reply, low and measured. "You won't live long enough to see that." Jennifer covered her mouth. I could feel her trembling beside me. "He killed Dad." The truth settled like cold ash. Harold hadn't died of surprise, he'd died of design. Outside, headlights swept across the window again. A car idled in the driveway. Black sedan. Jennifer whispered, "Mom?" I turned off the lamp. "Go to the back door, now." A shadow moved past the window, slow, deliberate. My hand found the small pistol Harold kept hidden in the side drawer, back when safety was theoretical. I'd never fired it, but the weight felt natural. A knock. 3 hard raps. I didn't answer. "Margaret," Brad's voice, muffled by rain, "we need to talk." For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of fear, but finality. "No, Brad," I whispered, raising the gun. "We're done talking." The sirens came just before dawn, faint at first, then swelling until the house itself seemed to exhale. Red and blue light bled across the wet lawn, painting everything in a feverish glow. By the time the officers broke down the front door, Brad was face down on the tiles, the rain from his coat mixing with the blood on the floor. The gun, his, lay beside him, its handle slick with water. I was sitting at the table, hands folded, the wooden box between them like a quiet witness. Jennifer stood behind me, pale and shaking. She hadn't said a word since it happened. She didn't have to. The truth had already filled the room, thick as smoke. Detective Ramirez crouched beside Brad's body, her eyes flicking to me. "Self-defense?" "He came to finish what he started," I said. I just made sure he didn't. It wasn't pride in my voice. It was finality. The kind that arrives after too many years of being polite. When it was over, statements given, evidence collected, I stepped outside. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled like metal and endings. The sky was pale, almost forgiving. Jennifer joined me on the porch, wrapped in a blanket that made her look younger, softer, like the girl who used to climb into my bed after nightmares. "Mom," she whispered, "how do you live with something like this?" "You don't," I said. "You just decide it doesn't get to live with you." For a long moment we stood there, listening to the cleanup behind us, the zip of bags, the muffled radio chatter, the echo of what power sounds like when it's finally reclaimed. Weeks later, the investigators would uncover everything, the recordings, the accounts, the crimes buried under years of Brad's confidence. Harold's name would clear. My life would return, smaller but cleaner, like a page that's been rewritten without apology. Now, when I mop my own kitchen floor, I think of that night, not as tragedy, but as arithmetic. Every cruelty leaves a debt. Every lie demands its balance. I run the cloth over the tiles until they shine, then pour out the dirty water. It swirls down the drain, pink for a second, then clear. Some stains, it turns out, can be cleaned, just not gently.